Arizona market impact. What changes in 2026? Arizona is an investor-heavy state. That matters. Arizona is not a low investor state. It is one of the most active investor markets in the country. Phoenix consistently ranks among the top metros for rental growth and institutional single-family acquisitions. Scottsdale continues to attract luxury second home buyers and short-term rental investors. Mesa, Chandler, and Gilbert remain strong rental acquisition zones. Paradise Valley regularly sees high-value cash purchases structured through LLCs and trusts. Because of this investor density, the 2026 FinCEN real estate reporting rule will have a visible operational impact in Arizona. This does not mean the market slows. It means the transaction process becomes more structured and more transparent. Cash will still be king, but transparent. Arizona has long valued cash offers. Cash reduces appraisal risk, removes lender underwriting timelines, and often wins in competitive environments. That does not change in 2026. What changes is the expectation of anonymity when cash is paired with entity ownership. The working formula becomes cash plus entity plus no. Institutional lender equals transparency trigger. For example, a Gilbert investor purchasing a $450,000 rental property through a newly formed Arizona LLC using private capital may fall within reporting scope. In contrast, a Chandler buyer purchasing through an LLC but obtaining financing from a regulated national bank may not trigger the same reporting structure because institutional lenders already operate under federal compliance systems. The investment strategy remains viable. The compliance expectations increase. Agents who prepare investors for that distinction reduce friction at closing. Short-term rental investors. Scottsdale and several Maricopa County pockets remain heavily influenced by short-term rental investors. These buyers frequently use LLC structures for liability protection and tax planning, and often purchase with cash or private capital. Those transactions may fall within reporting scope. However, the rule does not prohibit short-term rental purchases. It does not modify zoning regulations. It does not restrict rental use. It requires reporting transparency at closing when certain structural elements exist. For example, a Scottsdale investor acquiring two properties in separate LLCs using private funds may encounter beneficial ownership reporting. The strategy itself remains lawful and common. Transparency simply becomes part of the closing process. Institutional buyers versus individual investors. Large institutional buyers typically operate within compliance-heavy frameworks already. They use regulated lenders, structured financing, internal legal departments, and established reporting systems. Individual Arizona investors using newly formed LLCs with private funds may feel the shift more directly. For example, a Phoenix investor accustomed to 5-day hard money closings may now need to provide ownership documentation earlier in escrow. That does not eliminate speed, but it requires planning. Brokerages working with smaller investor groups should provide early education so that documentation requests do not feel like surprises. Sophisticated institutional buyers are unlikely to be startled. Independent LLC investors may initially need adjustment. Luxury market impact. Paradise Valley and North Scottsdale frequently see all-cash purchases, out-of-state buyers, entity ownership, and trust structures. While earlier geographic targeting orders focused on certain luxury markets nationwide, the 2026 rule is trigger-based rather than strictly price-based. A $3 million Paradise Valley estate purchased through an LLC with cash may trigger reporting. A $375,000 Mesa rental purchased through an LLC with private capital may also trigger reporting. Price alone does not control applicability. Luxury transactions may experience reporting more frequently simply because entity ownership and cash are common in that segment. Transparency applies evenly across price points when structural triggers are present. Will this slow the Arizona market? Historical patterns suggest that transparency regulations normalize rather than suppress markets. FIRPTA compliance under 26 U.S.C. Paragraph 1445 did not eliminate foreign investment. Lead-based paint disclosures did not eliminate older home sales. Affidavits of disclosure under ARS. Paragraph 33-422 did not eliminate land transactions. Markets adjust. Professionals adapt. Buyers and investors incorporate new requirements into routine workflow. The difference between disruption and normalization often depends on agent confidence. Agents who treat reporting as dramatic create drama. Agents who treat reporting as procedural create smoother closings. Commission and compensation impact. The 2026 rule does not regulate commission structures, alter listing agreements, change buyer-broker compensation, or modify Arizona contract law. It operates independently of MLS compensation frameworks and representation agreements. Transparency about ownership reporting is separate from commission reform discussions. Agents who clearly distinguish these regulatory topics prevent confusion among clients. Investor behavior shift. Some investors may consult attorneys earlier, explore institutional financing options, adjust entity timelines, or consider purchasing in personal name rather than through a newly formed LLC. These are lawful strategic decisions. Agents must not recommend structuring choices for reporting avoidance, but they should be prepared for thoughtful adjustments in investor behavior. For example, an investor who previously formed an LLC 2 days before closing may now form the entity earlier and organize documentation in advance. Planning replaces reaction. Professional confidence in 2026. The Arizona agent who can confidently state, yes, certain entity purchases without institutional financing require federal reporting handled by escrow, will stand out as informed and composed. Professionalism replaces confusion. Clarity builds trust. Investors prefer agents who anticipate regulatory processes rather than discovering them at the closing table. The Arizona market remains strong. The difference in 2026 is structure, transparency, and preparedness. Transition to Section 6.2. Now that we understand the broader market impact across Phoenix, Scottsdale, Mesa, Chandler, Gilbert, and Paradise Valley, the next step is addressing the most common practical questions agents and investors will ask. Section 6.2 will focus on frequently asked questions and gray area scenarios as Arizona moves deeper into federal transparency integration.